Yo, it's your man, Solemn Brigham, one half of the dynamic duo Marlowe, the whole half of the dynamic, me, and you are listening to the Cabbages podcast. Stay live.
Hello and welcome to Shamrocks, a Leprechaun movie podcast, the only unofficial weekly hip-hop podcast about the Leprechaun cinematic universe. I'm your host, Gary Suarez. I'm a freelance music journalist and critic, and I write a twice-weekly hip-hop newsletter called Cabbages, which you can subscribe to for free at cabbageshiphop.com. Joining me as always is my co-host, music industry insider Jeffery Laughlin, and today we'll be discussing Leprechaun Back to the Hood, the 2003 movie that Entertainment Weekly called equal parts funky fresh and severed flesh, adding, quote, "If a movie could spark a race riot, this is it." But before we get into it, here's a word from our sponsor.
Hello, Cabbages podcast listeners. Your co-host Jeff here. Gary and I are placing ads on Cabbages, and all proceeds are going to the Brooklyn Community Kitchen, a food bank in Greenpoint. So far, we've raised $160. This week's sponsor is the Pathways radio show. Hosted by yours truly, Pathways is mostly a jazz show, and it explores the alleyways and crevices that peaceful jazz creeps into, including neoclassical, ambient, R&B, etc. But it's mostly jazz. It comes on every other Saturday on newtownradio.com. It's also cataloged on the Newtown Radio Mixcloud. Come find some peace with Pathways. He might actually be protecting us from what he has become. Does that make sense? So no, he's guarding this gold and keeping it away from everybody because he knows it only spurs an awful life, a life trapped in avarice.
I'm not going to let you
a life
sit
trapped
there.
In avarice, the Leprechaun story.
I'm not going to let you sit there and
I think
ascribe
that would
altruistic
be a great
values. I'm not going to let
that would be a great avenue for, say, a musical about the Leprechaun.
I'm not going to let you ascribe altruistic values to the Leprechaun. He is a villain through and through. There is nothing.
Why are we cheering for him so hard?
Because
of the performance?
Because it's a masterful performance. Okay. It is a masterful performance by a character actor committing to a role that the actor's delight shines through.
That's definitely part of it.
And I think that's probably where your issue going back
a more
to being
universalist theory, perhaps a more open-minded theory would be also the Leprechaun could be an okay guy. He's made some mistakes. The gold thing, it's a bad thing. But are we to judge him on those sins? Who are we to judge, Gary?
Do we not take into account how many people he's murdered over the course of these films? Just plain up murdered, including people who've done nothing to him and have not even touched his gold.
We don't. Universalist theory actually doesn't apply there, no.
He's a piece of shit, but we love him. I'm so excited to introduce our guests for today's show. Joining us now is Arielle Castillo. She currently works as a U.S. content producer for Manchester City Football Club. Her writing bylines and content credentials also include work for Jacobin, Rolling Stone, and the Miami New Times. Also joining us today is Solemn Brigham. The North Carolina-bred rapper is one half of the duo Marlowe with producer L'Orange. Their latest album, Marlowe 2, is available now via Mello Music Group and wherever music is streamed or sold. He also appears on the record label's compilation Bushido. Please welcome our guest to the show. Hello, and welcome to you both.
Hi.
Hello. This is for Leprechaun. It's for Lep in the Hood.
Lep, back to the hood. We have been in the hood before with Lep. He has murdered many people in the hood before and has come back to murder even more people in the hood.
He really has a real thing for killing black people, doesn't he?
It's just really wrong, like the entire thing. But I guess once you get to the 6th movie, you've just accepted the wrongness and the fact that this is happening. So
oh, it's just happening. It's just happening. There's nothing to do about
there's
it.
nothing left at this point. My life is in shambles.
I always wondered after taking up the space, why go straight to the hood? You know, I always wondered, like, who was at the table and sat down and said, "This is where the money is. Let's take them to the hood."
So I actually know the answer to that. I know the answer to that. Essentially, after Space, the next movie was supposed to be Leprechaun in the White House. And instead, the producers were like, you know who likes horror movies? Black people. So let's make a movie with black people in it. We'll go to the hood. Because that's the only place I guess they knew where black, they couldn't have a black president. That's crazy.
that was going to be my first.
Oh yeah, that's absurd.
That would have been like crazy.
They learned a little bit after the first one.
It's funny because the first Hood movie, my parents were extreme censors. They weren't even they weren't religious or anything. They were just sort of censors in a hippie way, right? So I wasn't allowed to see like anything like this. I could barely play any video games except if they were educational. So I had a super sheltered childhood as a millennial. So when I saw snippets of Leprechaun on TV, like the actual creature scared me. So I never saw any of these movies actually until I want to say 3 years ago. I was out at a bar in Queens and they had Leprechaun in the Hood playing on these old TVs with no sound. And I left my friends and I spent the entire time in shock because I was like, there's no way. There's absolutely no way that this is real. And everyone was like, well, where were you in 2000? I'm like, I don't know, elementary school. But just without the sound, it's almost like a satire of an edgelord movie, only it really happened. It was really greenlit. And so, yeah, this one seems super tame in comparison. It's only like a little bit hack.
Your experience is dead on par with pretty much everyone. It was like, the movie is just always on. It's always on somewhere. Someone can always be like, you know what no one will complain about? Leprechaun in the Hood.
And especially on...
I can just toss that on there. It'll be fine.
Yeah, I remember early in like COVID lockdown in New York, sitting in my apartment. And I want to say they did a Leprechaun marathon on the Sci-Fi Channel or something. And I watched, I think, 4 of the 6 that day.
Wonderful day.
Yeah, to raise spirits or whatever, April of 2020.
But thank you for that random network. Whoever promote that human.
I'm pretty sure it was Sci-Fi.
I think it was too. Yeah.
I think they still do it, right? Didn't they do one this year? Except somebody was saying online that they were airing the episodes in reverse for some reason. So the movies, not that there's any continuity or any chronology with these, because again, you went to space.
There might be a little continuity. I don't know. I've been on for a long time, and I've always felt like they followed some kind of like linear storyline up until they went to space. Like there's ongoing themes throughout the Leprechaun history, like the statue always shows up. Now they do introduce him different ways throughout, but I've always been able to follow from the first Leprechaun up into the third. Now I did miss Leprechaun in space, and then the last 2 in the Hood and Back to the Hood. I think that was just for fun. But I always think that there was meant to be some kind of story with Leprechaun. It's like a Leprechaun.
Do you now?
In Leprechaun's favor, right? There were 6 of these movies, but although there is some continuity, you don't have to have seen any of them. And they still give you the little intro and a little bit of exposition at the beginning. So they still make sense, which is a completely different MO from any movie these days. Because if you see a superhero movie, they don't give you any information anymore. You just have to have seen all of them. So that's my compliment.
Or you get a bunch of soliloquies.
Right. So that is my compliment.
Like in Avengers, where everybody had like an 8-minute soliloquy.
They stop and
the
talk.
Camera goes a little dark and they were like, now I explain why I'm tortured.
Yeah.
And powerful. I'm like, oh, thank you. Another one.
Yeah.
You get one of those in each of these movies, and each origin story is different. And then the one after, when they like remake this shit, is called Leprechaun Origins. And like, how many origin stories do we need for the Leprechaun?
Wait, so how many were there? 6 or 7?
Well, just to be clear, we don't count the 2 reboots. There were 6 movies with Warwick Davis. And then they did 2 reboots. One was called Leprechaun Origins. It's not even the same thing. It's like totally unrelated. And then there's Leprechaun Returns, which is supposed to be a direct sequel to the first movie, but it's a totally different actor playing the Leprechaun. They bring back one character from the first Leprechaun movie to try to establish some sort of continuity, and I'm not fucking watching it.
Did they ask Warwick Davis, like, if he wanted to come back?
Yeah, they did. In Warwick Davis's book, in his memoirs, he talks about this, and they were trying to figure out a way to get him back. You know, this Back to the Hood is the first that Lionsgate did. All the first 5 had been through Trimark, and Trimark folded not long after Leprechaun in the Hood. I can't imagine why. And then when they were doing the 6th one, after they did that, they tried to get him back, but that's around the time that Warwick Davis got involved in the Harry Potter film franchise. And when you're doing Harry Potter and Star Wars movies, you don't need to go do Leprechaun 7.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
He mentioned, I think too, that he had a kid and was like, I don't really want to do horror.
So after the studio folded, like, you know, with all of these different movies and they had different directors and then different actors at the end, who owns the IP for Leprechaun? Like, did it get folded into Lionsgate? They bought the rights to the franchise?
I believe that's what happens. I don't know if that's the case for all of the Trimark films, which includes like the Warlock series and things like that. But it seems like Lionsgate is the owner of this. I don't know if Mark Jones gets a quarter every time I rent it or something for coming up with it as the originator. But I think Trimark being no more, everything has been sold to Lionsgate. This is Lionsgate's deal now.
So there's hope that we could still get another one, you know, if the people want it.
Yes.
We're holding out hope.
Actually, there's been some recent news on that front. The Darren Lynn Bousman, I don't know if you are familiar with him, guys, but he directed most of the Saw movies, and he has been on social media promoting the upcoming Saw sort of reboot, Spiral, which stars Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson. And he has been using his platform on there to advocate to Lionsgate, who own the Saw movies, to do a sequel, to bring back the Leprechaun.
And he directs.
He has a vision for the Leprechaun, and he wants to direct it. Now, we don't know where Warwick Davis falls into that. And again, Warwick Davis is there. He's about to do a new Willow series, a new thing for Disney Plus. So I think he might be a bit busy, but considering that some of these films were made in like 2 weeks, like I think it was
Leprechaun 3
was made in Leprechaun 3 was literally made in two weeks, and I think they spent a week and a half in the same pawn shop the whole time. So there's a chance we could get him back, which would be something.
I can understand why he wouldn't want to terrify his children, because to small kids, like, Leprechaun is probably the scariest thing you can meet, and he's magic, and he's like close to your height. You know, that's what really got me. A lot of people would just think that Leprechaun's some kid in a suit. Like, nobody really knows what Leprechaun is. And so they try to like make it real to themselves. They always think he's some guy in a suit or somebody dressed up for St. Patty's Day until he starts killing.
Yeah, like so he starts like ripping out their guts and showing it to them.
Well, and that's what struck me about watching this movie again, because it's been like a few months since I've seen the other one. But you end up questioning everything you think about sort of Leprechaun mythology, because, you know, he gets shot and survives. So I never thought that leprechauns had sort of supernatural strength or powers, but you end up starting to question everything you know about them as you progress through this franchise.
The powers are wildly different in each one, it feels like.
Because it's not the same leprechaun. That's why.
I like to believe in a magical world where things can be imaginative and fun, and the leprechaun is the same leprechaun all the way through.
You sure do.
Dad over here, old man Suarez, won't get off my case about it.
I think the suit was different in this one. I think the suit was different in this one, and maybe I think the second one.
I think the outfit in this one is the fanciest we've ever seen him.
Agree.
Yeah, by far. He's definitely, you know, the hat stays on a lot more than you expect it to.
Yeah, he never loses that hat.
But I think going back to a point that was coming up before is that like a lot of his adversaries, and this goes across the films, don't have a natural fear of him. They underestimate him constantly. They might be turned off by his physical appearance, but they're not necessarily concerned that he's going to do anything to them until they start to see the extent of his powers.
But there's the rare exception of a few characters. Like in this one, we had the magic lady.
Esmeralda, yeah.
Yeah. There's always somebody who seems to randomly know of the Leprechaun lore who gives the main character some hint, or they find something.
And that was something I didn't expect to see in this movie, which was a magic battle between the two most magical people in the film. I hadn't really thought that much about it. That was insane. Did either of you see that magic battle coming, including what seemed to be some sort of electric lasso at one point?
Yes, I saw it all coming.
Yeah,
it was tipped early in the film when nothing happened.
I wouldn't say that I saw it coming, but I did not see it coming. Anything is possible.
We have definitely learned
random.
We totally learned to suspend our disbelief enough in these films. And I think it was part 4 that really broke me on that respect, where once we were in space and just like, he comes back to Earth, I'm like, I don't care. The man was in space.
If you didn't see space, I implore you to do so, first and foremost. Secondly, Leprechaun just appears in space. We're never told how it happened or why, or if this is a space leprechaun. Nope. It's just that motherfucker is in space.
Well, the thing too, as I was rewatching this last night, you see the little slider on the app that shows you the movie's only an hour and a half long. And after the first scene, he doesn't show up for what seems like an excruciatingly long time. So I'm looking, and the slider's already at 20, 30 minutes. I'm like, all right, when is the actual titular leprechaun going to show up?
25 minutes.
I knew it was something like that.
Leprechaun. It's an entire fucking sitcom episode.
You know what it is? It's an injustice. It's an injustice to make me watch a film called The Leprechaun and a third of the movie does not contain the leprechaun.
Yeah, and when he does finally show up, he goofs off for at least, he smokes and then he kills that guy immediately.
He stabs him with a bomb.
He forgets about his goal for a little bit. He's raiding the refrigerator and stuff. He's got the munchies. He's smoking a bomb. And we don't know how he got out.
The first thing he says about Leprechaun 2 in his book, he basically says, then it was time to film Leprechaun 2. Next sentence, I smoked a bong that was big as I was.
Warwick Davis says that?
The bong was, bong was as tall as he was. That's why dude had to light it for him. Yeah.
Whoa.
But it was tobacco. So he smoked.
Is it herbal tobacco?
It was an herbal tobacco. So when he's coughing because tobacco makes you cough way worse than weed. And he's dying, and he said it gave him the best cackle of the entire series. And he was so pleased with the way his voice sounded.
Jeff, I just want to say how delighted I am that you finally, after 6 episodes of this, you finally read Warwick Davis's book. I've been citing it every single episode, and you finally have read it.
Gary, I got to admit, it was kind of Cliff Notes version. I read an oral history of the Leprechaun. And it was way enlightening. And I love Warwick Davis more than maybe I've loved anyone. And I don't really even give a shit about Willow.
So just so we're clear, you are citing a book you haven't read.
Correct.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure I'm still talking to Jeff.
Uh-huh.
Got it. Now, we did have to wait 25 minutes until we saw the Leprechaun again, but I think it's worth bringing up the first time that we see the Leprechaun in this film. And it's this weird semi-origin story of how he's gotten to the hood in this case, again, where we find out about, Father Jacob and Father Jacob having somehow got his hands on Leprechaun's gold, used that to fund a youth center, and now is facing the consequences, but yet somehow has figured out that you can make a 4-leaf clover holy water as a defense. That was? Yes.
Yeah.
See, I just thought it was normal holy water, and they were adding to the rules that holy items can hurt Leprechaun now. I didn't see if he had doused it or shredded up some 4 leaves and put it in there.
when I went back to it today and I listened to the dialogue as he's being hit with the water, the leprechaun shouts something to the extent of damn clovers. So we're supposed to get a sense that and again, like, so now we're getting this clear thing, like, okay, clovers are a weakness. In all these films, he has some sort of weakness.
Which was a callback because there were like whole giant swaths of this franchise where clovers weren't introduced at all.
No.
Really.
Like
but the first one, it like killed him. Then forever, there's nothing. And then all of a sudden, it's like everyone caught on to this clover craze again in the hood.
Yeah. Well, there was clovers in the weed in the hood. And I thought that was interesting. That was kind of like, maybe it was because, that area is where Leprechaun had made his domain. And so clovers had grew out of there. Now, what I thought was really interesting about this one is when she finds the gold, she creeps off, she goes into this door, right? And when she opens it, like this brand new land. But it kind of reminds me of when Leprechaun had his lair in Leprechaun 2. And I always thought it was pretty much like the realm of the Leprechaun,
Right.
And I thought it was kind of whack how he just left his gold just chilling there. Like, where was he when she came and got it? He didn't even know.
It's criminal how negligent he is about the gold for how important it is to his lifestyle. You know what I mean? Like, I guess, he's constantly being referred to as a very old being. You know what I mean? Like thousands of years, possibly. I guess sometimes you're going to leave stuff laying around. And maybe this is the only 6 times in those like thousands of years that he left the gold laying around. And that's why they're so interesting in his time.
It's so weird because you'd think after a certain number of times he would just figure out how to secure his gold and he wouldn't need to go to space and back to the hood. And it's like, well, how are you so stupid?
That's where I'm at. Totally.
He's very negligent.
It's really tough because then he's like so mad, but dog, you don't just hand people money, very valuable coins, and expect them not to. I'm sorry, but you need to be protective of this stuff.
The number of times he has been trapped in a safe and hasn't considered putting his gold in a safe. It's like it can hold you. Maybe it can hold your gold. There's a lack of logic. There's a lack of logic there.
There are 2 things that happen in this movie that like really stuck with me. One, this was the most, how do I say this? The most movie-like movie of the franchise. Like it looked and felt like they were filming a movie and not like a hilarious skit with a bunch of weird people who never met each other.
It wasn't It wasn't like an SNL thing they played right before the end.
It wasn't like slapdash. It was like put together, edited. This was a film.
There was a narrative.
Yeah, they'd spent 25 minutes on narrative and not cool Leprechaun stuff. They really sunk themselves into this. Got to recognize that. The second thing is they introduced the idea that this is a never-ending wellspring of gold at the disposal of the Leprechaun. So like you dump out the box of gold, and you just close it and open it. It's full of shiny, brand new gold.
Yeah, that was another thing.
Why is it so important to this Leprechaun to protect something he could just have at all times?
I have to say, I didn't think about it that deeply, but that's a good point.
Sorry.
I'm glad that it's something with it. Like they expanded on his gold a little bit. Like I think in Leprechaun in Vegas, given the gold, like maybe I think it granted you a wish there or something along those lines. But in this one, it was just like infinite gold. You know what I'm saying? And I thought it was hilarious.
Nothing means anything.
If you brought me a random piece of gold and tried to use it to pay me for something, I'd be like, I don't know what to do with this. I need some money. Yeah.
Instantaneously upon getting the gold, they're on like Rodeo Drive. Like, where did you find a place to trade this gold in and get money? Because if you roll up into a Rodeo Drive and like, here's 4 gold worthless pieces of money from 2,000 years ago.
No, Jeff.
They're not going to let you have it.
This is a reflection of your highfalutin lifestyle, because clearly where you live, you don't have cash for gold locations. Where cash for gold locations are in a certain neighborhood.
But it's not really a good exchange rate.
We're talking about like high-end dresses, right?
How have we talked about this for 30 minutes and not talked about the fact that Sticky Fingers is in it?
And he was marvelous.
But so I don't remember when this came out, but as I was watching it, was it supposed to be his big vehicle to film stardom? Because watching it now from 2021, you have to like know who he is, right? Because they don't even really make a big deal of him within the universe of the movie. He just has a few lines. So out of cultural and historical context, I just want to know, like, did y'all research how he even wound up in this?
Well, I think we'd be doing Sticky Fingers a disservice by retconning his history.
Yeah.
He was in Clockers in 95
okay.
and in Dead Presidents.
What year was that?
He was in Ride.
He was in Clockers and Dead Presidents.
When was Dead Presidents?
So both of those are 95.
So that's like 8 years then between those two and this one.
I mean, he did a lot of stuff that he did. He did TV work then. He did other movies. He was on Nash Bridges. He was in Next Friday.
Oh snap! He was Debo's brother.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was Tyrone.
Tyrone. We forget about Sticky Fingers. Shout to Sticky Fingers, man.
Yeah. So like all of that leads up to this in 2003, and then he continues on and continues to have a TV career. You know, he's been on Law and Order. He had a regular role on The Shield. Mm-hmm. More recently, he's been on Empire. You know, he's done and continues to work. So I think we have to just acknowledge that of a lot of the people in that film, and really in this entire franchise of movies, he's one of the few true actors who's actually in these movies.
He was the most experienced actor we've seen, other than maybe Warwick Davis in the whole franchise. That's a lot of roles before he came in here.
Then why is he so underutilized in this?
Right.
I don't understand.
That was sort of my question, right? Because considering
he was great.
Yeah, so they don't really even wink, nudge, nudge at his celebrity status in the movie. He's just a guy with a few throwaway lines.
Well, I always felt like it was just a cameo for him. I'd seen Sticky Fingers in a couple of other movies. And so seeing him in this one, I was surprised he had a small role, but there's so many other heavy hitters in this movie, like small key players, that I'm not surprised that they didn't. I wanted to give another shout out to Paige Kennedy, the guy who plays Jamie. Yeah, the guy who's smoking up out of crying. Not only is he an actor, and he's been in some small films, but he also is a pretty good MC. He's a really dope rapper. And I felt like the movie was more focused towards him. It was more focused towards the main character, the one who played Emily. I think she did a really good job. I haven't really seen her in a lot of other things, but I thought Sticky Fingers like blended a lot to the movie. He played a dope, intimidating dude. You know, he shot a leprechaun, and then he got murdered out pretty hilariously.
Yeah.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Sticky. I was really sad to see his character go. You know.
Yeah.
There goes the best actor in this whole thing.
It's good to see him in this. I think we can all agree he is underutilized for his talents. But again, it's a cameo, and it's like, how much money do they really have to offer for this? Do they have enough money? They're giving all that money to Warwick Davis to maintain the lead, but it's not like a lot of people are getting like big money to do these movies.
Yeah, another cool tidbit is the rub down lady who got.
Oh yeah.
I forget her name, but she was Smokey's mom in Friday.
Oh my God, you're right.
Yeah.
So Doria, Vicki Lynn Reynolds.
Vicki Lynn, yeah.
I knew
she plays that role a lot.
Somewhere in my notes, I have the mom chugs a 40 after a smash cut to the dog. I was really confused. Like, she walks into a room, there's a smash cut to a dog who is being offered weed, and the dog has no reaction. Then smash cut again, and the mom comes in and says something and just starts chugging a 40. And then whoop, we're done with that scene.
It's supposed to be that she busts in and she's like going to yell at him for smoking all that weed, but she's got like a one hitter in her hand or something.
Yeah.
And so then, that's where the big laugh is supposed to come in. She busts in and all she says is like,
that was a poorly executed laugh.
Yeah.
Well done.
The tonal shifts in this movie kind of for a quote unquote horror comedy is it becomes difficult to even find some of the funnier parts funny when the kills are so grisly. And at some point you don't really, at some point it's like, is the Leprechaun funny? Is he not funny in this? And it's like, when he's high, he's hilarious. And when he's like, you know, ripping the guts, when he's disemboweling some young woman in her bathroom, there's no humor in that scene at all.
Well, yeah, and the fate of the woman getting the massage that we were just talking about is completely unfair. You know what I mean? It's so completely random. Like, she didn't deserve that. And I actually, as I watched this, I found myself questioning my memory of the earlier movies in the franchise, because I was trying to remember, like, was the first one actually supposed to be scary, or did it just look scary to me because I was a child, or were they always supposed to be kind of funny? I don't get it.
Well, the first one's interesting because the first one was originally supposed to be a kids movie, and they shot the film and it was a kids movie, and then they gave it back to the execs. The execs said, "No, we'll do a better job if we bring this up from like a PG-13 to an R." So they went and reshot some scary, gory stuff. So yes, it was supposed to make you scared as a kid in the first place, but then they added grown-up scary stuff to it,
so that it was no longer appropriate for children.
Yes, no longer appropriate for children, but if you watch it as an adult, it is fucking weird.
It's a really strange movie.
You can really process what a horror comedy is supposed to be. So when I saw it, and I saw it when I had no business seeing it, you know, we rented it from like Blockbuster.
Yeah.
And it was Leprechaun 3 that I saw. As a kid, I remember no funny parts about that movie. Like, it was just all out terrifying. I had nightmares after that. You know, I needed help after that. But now looking back, and that's when I fell in love with horror comedies. Looking back at it, you know, I can see the jokes in it. You know, I can see how people could appreciate that. It is a really, really weird kind of genre, though.
It feels like its own genre in and of itself. Is that the Leprechaun movies? You described that, and people are just like, "Oh yeah, I got it." The Leprechaun, got it.
I just feel like this one in the sixth movie, they leaned really hard on the horror gore, which I think has more to do with, to be honest, the change in studios, is the move from Trimark, which I think had a better understanding of the comedy side as executed in all these films. Like, think about in Leprechaun in the Hood, in the first time the Leprechaun and Ice-T encounter each other. It's like Ice-T's pulling weapons out of his afro. They're having a battle next to some, like, you know, fast food leftovers. Like, it's an absurd first scene. And like, that jokiness repeats in multiple ways throughout the film. Again, there's some problematic aspects of it, but it does happen. Whereas this one, it's like that first fight with the Leprechaun and the Reverend there's nothing jokey about that scene. It is violence. And then the next time
see the 25 minutes minus the stoner character, you know what I mean? Like the archetype of a stoner being like lighthearted and jestery.
Yeah.
Everyone else is just talking about heavy shit and getting into possible fights.
Yeah.
It's wildly serious and sad. And then they're like, the Leprechaun hits a bong and we're like, well, everything's fine now. Let's have a good time.
I just don't know how you reconcile the gravity of disembowelment and, you know, ripping someone's heart out of their chest and all of these sorts of kills with the massage kill. You know, although I will say, and I think I'm sorry if I talked over you there. The cop's leg is definitely one of the best executions of horror comedy in the entire series.
But it kind of had a Monty Python feel, you know, like the knights.
Yes, exactly.
So that had to have been almost on purpose. Correct.
The leg just flew off so easily. Just pop, right?
There may not be continuity in this series, and we can have that debate a billion times. But
we won't
one thing that continues unabated throughout the films is the Leprechaun's obvious disdain for authority and cops, especially. He kills a lot of cops.
So would you say he's kind of an anarchist? Or?
I think he's a social justice warrior.
I don't think that.
Like an actual warrior. He's not about defunding the police.
No,
he's going further.
It's past abolishment.
Yeah, he's gone past.
He's far out. He is pretty far left on.
And I salute you, Leprechaun.
Hey, I'm cool with it. Leprechaun can be in my passenger seat. He might
There we
get
go.
us graves.
We ride with Leprechaun on this podcast. That's been something we agree on the whole time. Is we ride with Leprechaun on this podcast.
Yeah, you know, don't touch his gold. You know,
I've learned my lesson.
he said a friend with weed is a friend indeed, but a friend with gold is the best sometimes.
Yep.
How did they not bring back that line? Like, that's the iconic line. And I thought they would at least say it, you know, in a kind of hack way. And this one, then they just didn't.
The pot smoking scene was great. And it was my favorite part of the film, probably. But it was also like a wild missed opportunity there.
Yeah, right. You know, I honestly feel like had the guy just gave him the coin back, he wouldn't have killed him. He would have just smoked with it. It would have been cool, man.
I think it would have been cool because he smoked him out.
You know, in the last film, there was a lot more. There were limericks and rhyming again, and this one, he's back to just talking to you, and threatening you. There's no whimsy. Like, I mean, like I wrote down, like, I try to keep track of some of my favorite lines in these movies, and like when he's about to be shot by Rory, and Rory yells, "Say hello to St. Patrick's for me, bitch." And now I do want to point out, he doesn't say St. Patrick. He says St. Patrick's.
Is he referencing the day? Like, say hello to the day of St. Patrick.
I mean, the message clear either way.
Yeah.
But it's why it's one of my favorite lines in the film. But the Lep has very few great one-liners in this one. He's just mostly just like, "Give me back my gold." It's like, yes, we know. Like, you could say it in a different way, maybe in a funny way.
So if we're going to be realistic about this, I guess this is my least favorite Leprechaun character. Like, this particular movie, this was the very worst of the Leprechaun. I had the least fun with Warwick Davis in this one than any other one.
I can understand that. They took away from a lot of his magicness. I mean, he got clubbed on the head a lot. Like, he got beat up. Like, was just falling down. Like, his superpower was just true endurance, you know, nay, invulnerability. He just couldn't be. And they did expand on his lore, but they kind of, he wasn't rhyming anymore. The suit changed a bit. To me, he didn't look as scary as he did in some of the other ones. So, yeah, it was kind of like a different Leprechaun. I still enjoy
like
what
Leprechaun
they did.
Light. Like, the Leprechaun comes in and the kill is sort of the cool thing about it, which I didn't like. That's the reason I like the Leprechaun so much, is the kills weren't all that incredible most of the time. It was just that he was hilarious and like cackling and being like, and running away. It was fucking awesome.
Yeah. I mean, he had some moments, you know, definitely. I liked him under the car. That phone call that he had, he was
Pretty good moment.
hollering at the lady. And she just hung up on him, man. You know, that was hilarious.
Once again, the Leprechaun, the highlight of the film.
The sandwich making scene was pretty decent physical comedy, you know? Like, the choreography of that was clever. It was probably one of the highlights for me.
It was like Tom and Jerry.
Yeah.
It was like a cartoon. It was awesome.
Yeah, man. He could have, Paige Kennedy definitely could have looked down and saw the Leprechaun.
Just at some point, right?
So cartoonish.
Yeah. Well, he was really high, so maybe not.
That's it. Is that you can always hide it because they were all taking giant bong hits, man.
Yeah. He was to the moon.
This being the last of the Leprechaun films with Warwick Davis and the last episode of this podcast, I'm wondering sort of where does this film for our guests fall in your ranking or appreciation of the Leprechaun films?
Personally, for me, I gotta say, just on a personal level, because it was a horror comedy that I'm fond of, and they infused it with hip hop. You know, as cringy as it was, and how bad that I wish they could have gotten maybe some black writers and maybe some black casting directors, anybody black to be involved behind the scenes, I would have been cool with. But I still enjoyed it for the cast that they did have, for, you know, some of the jokes that they did make. You know, Leprechaun was already one of my favorite characters. And now, you know, I get to see him smoke weed, you know, and I get to see what he would do if he was in the hood. Hey, do we know where this movie was set at? Like, what city was it supposed to be at?
Yeah, I don't think they've been particularly good about revealing the where in either of the Hood films. There's
I mean, it looks
assumptions, but
vaguely
like,
California-ish, right?
oh, it's definitely West Coast. He's never been to the East Coast. He's been to space, but he's never been to the East Coast.
Yeah. I was thinking wherever this place is, I will never go. I will never be here. I will never drive through. I will take the longer route because it just looked terrible. They was having a cookout in a construction site and stuff. I think it was like the same construction site the preacher was trying to save.
It was.
Nobody does that in the hood. There's no magical lady in the hood with anime powers.
Arielle, can you lay out for us where you think this falls in your personal ranking or appreciation of these movies?
So I think the space one is really special. Obviously, this one is missing a lot of the really super uncomfortable, problematic aspects of the first Leprechaun in the Hood. However, I have to agree with you all that say the magic of the character is kind of gone in this one, because the first time I watched Leprechaun in the Hood all the way through, like I just laughed so hard at the ridiculousness of some of the lines, and that entire musical sequence at the end where the Leprechaun is rapping, like I really wanted something like that to happen and just rap in this one. So I really missed that. However, one thing I really enjoyed was the wardrobe in this movie, because it's so perfectly an encapsulation of like 2003 style. And I really enjoyed seeing like the old brands and just noticing how clothes fit differently. And I felt like it had such a sense of time about it that the other ones don't, or maybe that's just my own personal like interpretation of it because I remember 2003 very clearly.
The difference for me between the first Hood movie and the second Hood movie is that the first Hood movie, it's jarring how the music doesn't seem to match the times. And
no, you're right. The music was just trash. I had no idea. Like, did they think that was cool? Was that popping back then?
They hired the guys they hired for the music on the first Hood movie, known as the Boom Brothers, had done some work in the 90s and continue to do work today, but they were definitely not the hip hop production duo you wanted to hear in 2000. They were not bringing that. But again, when you have, and you brought this up quite clearly, is that when you have a lack of representation behind the camera in the writer's room and on all of these other administrative processes that go into making a movie, that's where you're going to make mistakes. You've got people of color on that side of the camera, but then like you're having them rap things that like no one's rapped since 1991. And then in this film, I feel like the music is vastly improved. I feel like the music that you hear at the party sounds like what you would have heard at a party in 2002, 2003. The style of music. I feel like the dialogue is
the
reasonably
most movie
improved
of all the movies.
I just feel like
actual decisions were made. Things went a little better, but it didn't really help the quality of the film for me all that much.
Okay, so before I let you guys go, who is your ideal rapper cameo to appear in Leprechaun Thrice in the Hood?
I'd love to see the baby in it. I think he'd be great. Okay. He has great comic timing.
The baby is funny. I'd throw Killer Mike in there. I think
okay.
Killer Mike does a lot for the community. I feel like they could spice him up and throw him in a row.
For me, I'd like to see somebody like Freddie Gibbs. I'd like to see somebody who I feel like could really take on the Leprechaun. I love Freddie Gibbs' music videos, especially because I feel like there have been some really good acting in those and some comedic acting. There's a great video he did with Eric Andre, and like I just feel like he could pull off the jokey side of it and the fighting side of it.
Oh, yeah. Freddie Gibbs is hilarious.
Yeah, he's hilarious. Jeff, who would you put?
I'm back and forth for the comedic element of just acting a fool in a movie. Lil Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
He would be a lot of fun.
I think he kind of takes himself very seriously.
But exactly. I'm not sure that he would want to do that.
Personal experience. I don't think he likes to make fun of himself in the way that you would need to in this franchise.
Then in that case, Open Mike Eagle.
I don't think they would give Weezy a lot of lines. I think it would just kind of like coast through it. It would.
That's what I was hoping for, though, right? Like I want like fun Wheezy to be there, just be like, "What is happening? Like, why are we doing?" Like he does a cameo in that basketball movie about the with Forrest Whitaker in it. Does anybody know this movie? I forget what it was called. Hurricane Street or something like that.
Hurricane Season with Forrest Whitaker, Taraji P. Henson. Yeah. Bow Wow was also in it too.
Yes.
Yeah, Bow Wow works. A couple of MCs have like good timing. And you'll see him in some comments. Like Snoop Dogg, I could see in a Leprechaun reboot. He would probably be hilarious.
I mean, like, is there any doubt that he would say yes to that?
Yeah.
Leprechaun in the Hood 3. Snoop Dogg already is like, he can hear Leprechaun in the Hood 3 happening. Be like, I'm in.
I think we know Snoop will say yes to pretty much anything.
He doesn't say no.
If you've paid attention to what Snoop has done over the past 5 years, I don't think he is capable of saying the word no. But he's making money, and God bless him for it.
Yeah, I tried some of his wine the other day, and it was pretty on point. This is not an endorsement, but make sure you have multiple ways of making money, kids.
I have lost the celebrity wine battle so many times at this point. Where like I'm just like not going to no more with the celebrity wine.
You've been burned too many times.
You drank Foghat wine.
I did. I drank Foghat's brand of wine, and it was pure gasoline. It was just garbage. We were mixing them all together to see if we could get a better taste. It was just awful.
Guys, I want to thank you so much for doing this with us.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I can't thank you enough for helping us do this.
Anytime.
Shout out to everybody that love Leprechaun like me and who can appreciate this movie. When you sign up to watch Leprechaun Back to the Hood, you know what you're getting in for, all right? So don't take it too seriously. And anybody that can enjoy that, I appreciate that.
Do you think we can get another Leprechaun movie straight up and down?
Yeah, I think we can do it. I think it happens.
I think it happened. Do you think it happens with a watchable one? So it has to be with WD.
Yeah, we're not talking about another reboot that doesn't involve him. I think we absolutely could get another. I think what Darren Lynn Bousman, while he hasn't revealed what his idea for bringing the Leprechaun series back to glory is, I think that he has an idea that involves Warwick Davis for sure.
I would 100% watch it and be delighted. I'm sure. I want this really badly. I want it worse than I want you to admit that Chucky would lose in a fight to some of the Leprechauns. In fact, you know what? Let me go ahead and just throw, because this is the last one. So we got to just end all this. I am going to cede all ground on the continuity argument, but that frees my license to rate each Leprechaun from each movie against Chucky, whether or not it could beat Chucky.
You know what? At this point, this
Number
is the
one.
Just
no.
Just
Leprechaun 1, I say no. Leprechaun 2, also no. See, already you're kind of surprised, right? Like, whoa.
I'm barely paying attention.
You thought I would go all Leprechaun, but I didn't. 3, yes. 4, yes. 5, yes. 6, no. Now, come on. That's 50-50.
Was that
That's
worth 50-50. It for you?
50-50.
Was that worth it for you?
You can't even entertain the notion that one of these Leprechauns, the one in space was like regenerative and incredible. The one in Hood could control human thought. Now one of them can beat him?
I just can't.
What's so special about Chuck? Come on.
I mean, have you seen the Child's Play movies? Like, have you even seen what he's capable of doing?
No.
Wait, Jeff. Have you?
Okay, so
Jeff,
in all the din and clamor of arguing, I might have not mentioned that I've never seen a Child's Play movie all the way through.
Are you fucking kidding me?
And I have very little knowledge of Chucky and the powers of Chucky.
Why have we spent an entire fucking season of this podcast talking about this?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Gary? Can you hear me, Gary? Can you hear me calling you?
I'm done.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Gary? Gary, don't be mad, Gary. This was fun. We had such a good time on this one. It's a Leprechaun. Yay. Diddly, 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 diddly. Play the music. Play the music.